All right, everyone, thanks for joining us so much here at Empath Cyber. We're going to dive in today with a really great talk on and deep dive into data flow diagrams. So what I have joined with me today is my good friend, Tim Golden from Compliance Risk IO. So Tim, you want to say hi?
Hey Wes, thanks so much for having me on here. I'm pretty excited to help transfer knowledge and leveling up our community with
My
one
pleasure.
what seems like a little thing, data flow diagrams, but a really important thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
oh yeah, and I run an MSP, so I am from Compliance Risk, founder of Compliance Risk, but I also still work at an MSP, so I can relate to y'all on the MSP side.
Right on. Love it. So tell just so we can understand who Compliance Risk is, tell us a little bit about that, your new venture.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. So we noticed that a lot of the MSPs have been struggling around compliance. And we have been under Vital Tech, we have been in that world since 2005, 2006, dealing with NIST, National Institute of Cyber Institute and Technologies, their special publication 853, which is a huge catalog of security and compliance controls. And we've spent the last 17 years sledging through that with federal contracts. We pivoted in 2019, became an MSP, and while we had been an MSP, decided to go after commercial clients under Vital Tech. And as I got involved in the MSP community and met great people like Wes, I just realized how much you all struggle with understanding what can be a complex world of compliance. So we separated the two companies. Vital Tech is the technical implementation, and Compliance Risk is all about being here for you as the MSP, providing you the details, providing you the services, helping you in this compliance journey. So separated them out, saw an opportunity for us to help the MSP community and kind of pull this all together under a separate umbrella called Compliance Risk.
Love it. Awesome. So Tim, thank you. So definitely go check out what Tim's doing there with Compliance Risk. I think it's some really great stuff. I think MSPs can really use it. So first, let's open the mic up a little bit before we dive in deep. Does anybody currently do data flow diagrams at all with their clients? Okay, I see Jennifer raised his hand. Tim, you don't count today since you're literally teaching us. Bob, so Jennifer, let me go to you first. Jennifer, talk to us about what you're doing, lessons learned, all that good stuff.
Yeah, because of our exposure to Department of Defense contractors, it is a must. We have to have a data flow diagram, and all the auditors or pre-auditors are asking for it. So we created a paid-for program where we'll come in and completely data flows map and scope the environment. So we look at cloud, we look at infrastructure, we look at users, we look at everything. And we actually created a template. When I can find it, I will share the template real quick with you guys if you like. I'm happy to do that. It took a lot of hundreds of hours to develop, but it looks pretty simple. But I used Amira Armand's, if y'all know her, mapping, her flow mapping, and we simplified it down to one or two templates. So super interested in the topic today. It is absolutely a great thing, and really no assessment should be done without knowing the scope of what you're looking at.
Love it. And we will take you up on that sharing if you don't mind. We would absolutely love the more things we get to see, and we do that a lot. So we'll hold you to it, Jennifer, if you don't mind. Bob, how about you guys? I saw you raise your hand too.
Yeah, well, and I was talking to Tim before anybody got on because we were early birds. But growing up as a programmer, diagramming and data flow diagrams are just kind of part and parcel of what you had to do to actually execute on the discipline, right? So as I moved up in position in organizations and even up until the C level where I'm at now, COO level, we use data diagrams in multiple forms throughout the entire process, whether it's an internal process or a third party or a customer process, and how those interact with ourselves. We use everything from state diagrams to swim lane diagrams, where you're showing the high level flow of work, through the organization across multiple departments in that, because that typically helps us figure out where to watch, metric wise. So that helps define that relationship with the customer by defining where the touch points are between the organizations. So this is, I mean, Tim and I were talking, this is just, it's kind of like breathing, for us to be able to use this, everything from mind maps all the way down to state diagrams, every level we use it depending on what the application is. But I can tell you, it is a necessary skill to have if you really want to be able to feel comfortable that the people you're talking to understand what you're really trying to do and what the requirements are, for that particular process. So yes, we use it across all fronts.
Love it. So one of the reasons I always ask, if you guys have joined any of the other deep dives we've done, like we did one on CIS controls, I'm like, who's using it right now? The reason I start before we even introduce it with who is using it is so you can hear from some of your peers on like, okay, cool. I still don't know what it is, but I'm hearing great things from Jennifer and Bob on its use. That definitely gives me some buy-in to say, okay, I definitely want to learn. So what we want to do, we're going to start with this, Tim, is let's level set and let's enter into this as if we know nothing. So let's start at the kindergarten level and start walking us through data flow diagrams, what they are, how we think about them, how we use them. And as always, want you guys to interrupt Tim as much as you want. Let's enter in, let's have great conversations, all that good stuff. So Tim, take it away,
I'll start
my friend.
off interrupting. How about that, Wes?
Please do it, Steven.
I've also used it in the software development side a lot, but I then was able to transfer that over and use it, including whiteboard sessions with business owners as you're talking to them, mapping it out. It really
Yes.
helps them visualize and think through it. So keep that in mind as an additional use.
So great stuff, Stephen, Bob, Jennifer. Thank you. Like, I love the fact that I keep hearing SDL, software development lifecycle. And by the way, I will pause and try my best to, anytime I have an acronym, I'll try to quantify that with what it means. So if I keep doing that, it's because I'm making an assumption that most people don't know what acronyms mean.
It's for me, guys. It's all for me.
I live in the GRC world, the governance, risk, and compliance world, plus 13 years in the military. So everything is an acronym to me. It's even better being dyslexic. So if I mess them up, that plays into it too. But I'm going to try my best to make sure that I don't speak in total acronyms today. And when I do, you can all stop me and ask me, what is that? Because I hate to say the only dumb question is the one not asked, right? So, good space for us to have these conversations. Feel free to stop, as Stephen just did, and interrupt along the way. As Wes pointed out, why do we care? Level set. What is data flow, right? So we kind of put some slides together. They're very wordy, but I wanted to be able to give this to you as a takeaway after the session so that you can refer back to them and have words other than just the talking, right? Something to refer to after. So I've given this to Wes. He can put it on Empath. You will have it afterwards, plus some other samples going forward. Plain and simple, it's a way for us as IT professionals or software development lifecycle people or CMM practitioners like Jennifer. It's a way for us to work with our businesses and our clients to help them understand, what do I have? How does it come to us? Where does it go? And what do we do with it, right? I'm not going to read this off, but does anybody have any sort of questions so far around what the heck is a data flow diagram?
Oh, I want to add one thing. First of all, let me quiz you guys. What are the first two controls in CIS? What's CIS control 1 and 2? Does anyone want to spout off and tell me what they are?
Inventory, hardware and software.
Nailed it. Right on. There you go. So I think that was Mike Cole. Bingo. So there's a presupposition here, which is this. The reason we start with those two controls is we have to know what the heck is in our network. I cannot secure what I do not know about. Miss Client, when we come in as your MSP, one of the first things we want to know is what's in your network, because we're responsible alongside you to make sure that we're keeping them operational, efficient. We get the nasty things out that shouldn't be there. But then one of the things that comes after those two controls is what Tim is talking about here is now that I understand what's in my network, how does it flow in my network? And I can tell you from my days at Perch, there are breaches that occur because we never had understanding of how data flows.
Mhm.
And that's a major problem. And I also think it's probably literally impossible for every MSP to by default know the data flows of every client. You just don't naturally know it because all your businesses are using their own line of business apps. They do things in their own way. And so until you start to talk to clients and understand, as Stephen said, whiteboard it out, you're going to be missing a lot of those things. So awesome. Tim, keep going. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
Another thing people often forget, I guess I do have other thoughts. Another thing people often don't think about when mapping that out is what state is the data in when you're transferring it? Is it encrypted or not? Is there data at rest and is it encrypted or not?
Great.
So
great.
not just what is it and how is it flowing, but what state is it in as it's flowing or at rest?
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, and I'll add in on top of that as well. You can go through and get a SOC 2 certification, or you can get lots of different certifications or credentials. And some of your clients that are not savvy will just go, okay, that sounds great. But then you go get acquired like we do. And now you have some savvy clients that say, hey, but what about this data center and this data center? It doesn't look like it's in your scope. And having a diagram like this to help you stay ahead of that and be able to, oh, we already have that in place. We're already getting a renewed audit and it helps you not look stupid from the security positioning.
Exactly. And, Wes started to touch on this, right? So I think we can all, let me just back up one slide. We can all agree that we have a general baseline understanding of data flow diagrams, and that is, what are we getting? Where is it coming from? What do we do with it? And where does it go? As a sort of baseline. Sure, there's a little more detail. We can all agree on what is a data flow diagram. As Wes started to allude to, why are they important? Right? Wes was talking about some of the security risks as we look at CIS, and we know what components are within that company, within that organization, servers, email, all of these fun things that we do in the inventory from the hardware and the software in the human inventory aspects, right? We actually have one of our defense contractors, their prime is literally texting them CUI, and I've seen that one other place. I think I saw that on LinkedIn as well, but the human aspect of the inventory, right? So why is it important? Identifying the risks, knowing where those holes are in the flow, being able to improve incident response. Maybe Jennifer, you probably might have a couple of other reasons beyond the contractual obligations in CMMC. Maybe there's a couple of other reasons why that I haven't listed here. In fact, I know there is.
I mean, no, I think that I think the listings that we put out there are reasonable. I will add though, there are some times when a client just doesn't know where their data is. They really just don't understand. And being able to be that trusted advisor and showing them, did you know it's in these 5 other places too? By having those interviews and talking to clients, it can give you that extra gravitas that you need with that client and show that true value.
Exactly.
So
anybody else want to chime in on why they're important?
We could go on all day. I mean, we use them even internally, right? We use them to make sure that all of everybody understands how a particular product or service is delivered to a customer, right? So, the workflow and data diagramming to go along with it are 2 of the ways that we put those in place, so that even when we hire new people, we put them through our know before learning management system, and they go through training and look at those data flow diagrams along with all the policies and procedures. They can click and they're all hot linked, right? So they can click down that data flow diagram and look at all the underlying SOPs and everything else that tie to that. And that alone, being able to institute that here, I mean, we went from like a 96% customer satisfaction rating to a 99.6 and we've been there for 8 months because nothing deviates from how we've kind of defined it, right? So there's a whole myriad of reasons why data flow diagrams can be used at different levels, but the part that's not on here is like, okay, well, you can use those internally to make sure that you get consistent results. It's very useful in that regard for certain.
Yeah. I like what you said about using it internally to get consistent results, right? So we're talking today in the context of DFD around cybersecurity, around compliance. However, when I'm building out an SOP and I'm looking at my onboarding SOP, there are steps in that process that I could use a data flow diagram of how, like, diagramming in general is very useful. It makes us more operationally efficient, but it also gives us that opportunity to have a documented, repeatable process, right? When you buy something from IKEA, I buy the same thing that Wes buys. We're going to put that together in the exact same manner because we have a documented, repeatable process, right? And so even beyond just the cybersecurity risks that DFDs can help with, it will make you more operationally efficient. And it's a tough discipline. I get it. Like, documenting stuff as an MSP is usually the last thing that happens. However, we've tried to build the culture. It's the first thing that people do, then they go fix it, or they're building it along the way. So any other potential reasons why they're important that we might have missed?
One thing I think about is, you may be looking at this and you're like, okay, I get it, but that's a hard sell to my client who's going to be like, well, that's your job to handle the security risks, not mine. Or mitigation strategies, it's why I pay you. Or incident response, like, we're not going to have that happen. Like, if you have those fears, or even a client's thinking about this, you can actually reverse the tables on them a little bit. And I'm going to steal a page out of Brian Blakely's book. If you guys don't know Brian Blakely, you love him. He's awesome. And one of the things he says is, he's like, when I talk about data flow diagrams, before I even use those letters, those acronyms, I'm like, hey, let's talk about how you make money. And let me tell you, every business owner on planet Earth loves to talk about how they make money, period. 100%. They say there's no absolutes in this world. There's an absolute. And you can use that whole, like, tell me about how you make money. What do you do? What's your process? What do you mean how we make money? Well, and then using Steven's example, here's the whiteboard. Let's actually decompact this a little bit and understand how you make money. You start tracing this out and flowing it out. And I'm telling you, that kind of, if you have a struggle with this because you think they don't care about it, go to the heart of it, of how they make money, because that's really what you're talking about. And that'll get them talking. And then they're going to wake up and be like, huh, didn't know that. And you're going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know this. So you guys really take an email from a PDF and print that to PDF and then reattach it as another email to send it on to somebody with like all this, like, yeah, we do what? Like, you're going to find these bizarre things that your clients do that not only are they wildly insecure, but you're going to have opportunity, especially as billable hours, to go course correct those inefficiencies that make them really happy. So while security is forefront to this, there's also a lot of other motivators that DFDs can really solve for to make them happy in terms of business process efficiencies, understanding workflows, all this kind of stuff that's valuable.
I should put out, so as part of our onboarding, so once an agreement is signed, the techs go do their onboarding, and from the CIO, CISO perspective, I actually have a 14-point questionnaire that we break up into 2 parts, 7 and 7, and business operations and who are they as a company. I should share that. I should dump it on LinkedIn, but I should share that so that, as Wes pointed out, like, I'll give you an example. We had one client that had copiers all over the place and different contracts all over the place. But because I didn't map out where they were in the beginning, 6 months into this, when one came up for renewal, we stopped and we pumped the brakes and we went through an exercise of what are they for? We mapped out where they are, how people use them. In a sense, we data flow diagrammed all of those machines. Come to find out, they had 15 machines, all with different contracts, all with different whatevers. By the time we got to the end, we reorganized standardized, had one style of device, and we saved them $300,000 a year for 5 years. Do the math. Right? All because we took this kind of data flow diagramming or this workflow diagramming process into their business to help them understand. So yes, we are talking in context of cybersecurity, but applying the similar context to other areas of their business.
Well, I've warned customers. I'll say, you know what? I'll just let me for free. I'm going to diagram this one workflow inside your organization just for free. And there will never be a day when you go through that process that you don't uncover 15 dumpster fires right in front of God.
Exactly.
And I love doing it real time. I love doing it right there with everybody in the room. I'll get a mind map going, and I'll get a data flow diagram going. And you're not going to get halfway through that before you see lots of big eyes and mouths open. Well, wait a minute, I didn't know it worked like that. Wait a minute, why are we doing it that way? You just uncover a dumpster fire in no time whatsoever. Every time.
Yeah, the question Wes mentioned is the one I usually start with. How do you make money? Let's talk through it. And then out of that, you can also identify, okay, so out of this process that we've mapped, where do you see your slowest problem? What's your biggest issue here? Well, then you can go and map that particular process, because sometimes they'll talk in general terms, and then you can start diving in and detailing and mapping out the individual areas.
Yeah.
So something else to remember as well, at least was with CMMC, as far as that's concerned with data mapping, it doesn't just want you to data flow map your CUI data. It wants to know what your security protection assets are. It wants to know, what physical security elements you have. It wants to know what is out of scope, but it wants you to list what is out of scope. I mean, there's a lot of other pieces there that are as valuable. And if you don't list them, even just being out of scope, your auditor is going to say, hey, what about this? Let's have a 3-hour long conversation if this is in scope or not.
Exactly. So Jennifer is our resident plant, because she literally just brought us into control frameworks, right? Jennifer, you mentioned CMMC, right? It is as part of the CMMC DoD 800-171 requirements, being able to know what is in scope and how to define that, right? So Wes and I, we want to talk a little bit about, we mentioned this earlier, like CIS. There's a whole set of controls specifically on data protection, right? And, IG1, there's, you see the slide. I'm not going to get in it, but I'm going to kind of show you real quick. There are 14 pieces of CIS in section 3, all around data protection. Yeah, I'm not going to read them to you, but I am going to put out 2 of the key points. Establish and maintain data management process, 3.1, and document data flows, 3.8, right? So as we look at standardizing our non-regulatory or compliance customers on a framework like CIS, there are 2 very specific points on DFD and process around it. CMMC and all the others, yes, they have similar components, but I wanted to kind of point that out. Wes, do you have anything you want to talk a little bit about?
Well, a question for you. So actually, let me ask this to the group, and then I have a specific for you, Tim. How many of you guys have a documented data management process?
Can you define a little bit more of what you mean by data management process?
What you see there, Jennifer, in 3.1. So like some kind of like policy that documents like how you handle data sensitivity, who the owners are, retention, all that kind of stuff. So is it fair to say, I see a few hands go up, but is it fair to say most don't have that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's zoom into that for a bit. Tim and Jennifer, since you have one too, Bob, can you share some guidance on, okay, sounds like I don't have that in place. How do I get going on that?
Who's going first?
I'll let you go first.
I could talk about this stuff for weeks. So one of the things that we established alongside our diagramming is a data governance policy, right? And a data governance procedure. And we're going to get into this in our hands-on lab here in a few minutes, right? That policy talks about who is responsible for what, where the stuff lives, who the data owners are, the classifications, right? So for us, and actually you'll probably end up seeing this in future pieces of CISA, like for us, email address is considered PII. Our company has standardized saying, and that's kind of a little controversial, but all the work that we do with the feds, they say it's PII. So we're adopting, hey, it's PII.
And define PII for us real quick.
Yeah, personal identifying information. Normally people would say social security number, date of birth, and hometown, like that would be considered PII. We've taken it a step further to include email addresses. The reason why is one of the clients is an educational client, and we have 50,000 students' email addresses plus all their student data. For us in that particular project, that's PII. Like we wouldn't want that data and those records to fall victim, right? So all of the things in our data governance policy talk about the types of data, the places of where those data can and cannot be stored, who can and cannot access that data, labeling that data. Jennifer, you'll know about labeling, right? So some of the things, some of the things actually fall into a CUI, controlled unclassified information, a CUI NARA category, the organization that defines what categories are. All of those things are built into our data governance policy and then our data governance procedures, right? So we use those two pieces hand in hand. All right, enough. I can probably go on for weeks.
Jennifer, Bob, anything to add to that?
I always wait for someone else to talk as Wes knows I'm a talker.
Me too, I'm the same way, Jennifer. I'll just shut up.
I'm working on my leadership skills.
Right.
I mean, I would honestly, Tim, you took a lot of words out of my mouth. Being able to define, there's a lot of controls that will say organization can define this. Organization can define what the structure is, who has access to this, what type of employee has access to this, and so forth. So having a all-inclusive, an overall policy that states governance beyond just what's attaching to each specific control, we find very important. I'm actually doing that with Meriplex now as a larger, 1,000 person organization of trying to define, okay, what is our governance in all these different departments and all these different places. And it can be a very large task to do. But from an MSP side, MSPs can go to their clients and really help advise them well on, hey, let's establish what sensitive data you have, what qualifies as that sensitive data, who can see it, how they address it. Some people may think, oh, well, this is my entire 55-page, InfoSec policy. Well, no, this is a more holistic 10,000-foot view, and we're going to have call outs for a very specific controlled access policy, mobile device policy, and so forth that go deeper.
I was just looking for, I should have had this, sensitive, and you guys keep talking. I'm going to look for a document. Real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, while you're looking at that, I mean, a lot of the software development side has to take this into account as well as you're building apps to store data. How are you storing it? Where are you storing it? Who has access to it and all that? So a lot of that transfers over to the MSP side where you're looking at your clients. Hey, clients have data. You have your clients' data in some cases. So how are you protecting that? Who has access? The other thing I was going to say is Microsoft's actually done a lot on the Azure side of things to help you with data management and governance. So
Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to share real quick. Let me know if you can see my PDF.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a little like our data classification policy talks about, where is it, who has it, who can get to it. And I can probably share some sort of templates around this if people want down the road. But this is just one of the many documents that we have that keeps track of what are we doing.
Yeah, love it.
We're,
be
we're,
great.
we're service leadership, right? So we're always operating under the operational maturity level framework as well. And that's a lot of this is embedded as a component of that, especially roles and responsibilities and access to systems and that whole thing, right? So it's a little bit of an art to figure out how to structure these things. To be able to build your system so it naturally complies in a lot of ways because it's structured the right way to begin with. Because it's a lot more difficult to go back and try to retrofit that in a lot of cases because it matters which way you stack the cards. So as you're building this, it's always better to know what your end result could look like as you're kind of building it and stacking it together so that it doesn't create such an overhead burden. Because what we're not saying is that by having all this documentation means you got to maintain it. And you have to be consistent about how you maintain it. You have to be consistent about how you modify it and all those other things, right? And there's a tremendous amount of overhead. So you're always looking for a balance between what needs to be done and what absolutely doesn't need to be done from this perspective. Because you can burn overhead like crazy by over documenting.
You can.
Seldomly used procedures and ones that really don't matter from a compliance standpoint. So there's a don't set the house on fire while you're inside it kind of a viewpoint you need to have about these things because it could really eat you alive.
It's similar to that is not only do you have to document it, but then you actually have to practice it. So
That's the key.
just because it's documented doesn't mean it's happening.
And I would also kind of throw in a little warning, right? Like, so you were mentioned over documenting. Definitely do not create a policy or a procedure that isn't actually in place, right? I'm gonna go back to this, right? So this is another one, right? So you can see we've iterated year after year after year after year, right? The key being like we started with a document that said we don't have a policy, but we're going to write one, and then wrote one, and then 3 months later changed it. 3 months later, iterated and built it along the way, right? Because number one, and I can't speak to the insurance world, but when the insurance things happen and they come and say, where's your policy? And you hand them a document that says, here's all the glorious things that we wrote that we said we were going to do, but don't actually do, you're in trouble.
You're in a bind.
You're in trouble.
Well,
right?
and it can push you into a gross negligence claim too if you ever do have a breach. Because you obviously knew it was a thing you should be doing because you wrote it down.
Yep.
And you just decided not to do it. So I completely agree with that. I amen you on that, Tim.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share, since Web's brought it up, like, how do we do these things? This one is no longer confidential because all of this stuff has now been moved and changed in this particular organization, who happens to be my parent company. But we started talking about the definitions: public versus privileged versus confidential, identifying the class of data, right? This is now all changed, so I can share this. So this is not like sharing proprietary information. But if you notice, when I first wrote this back in 2008, the first thing that we said was Mr. Project, Mrs. Project, she, they, him, her, sorry. That human needs to identify the document before they put it in the network, right? The process, because if it doesn't happen in the beginning, it'll never happen. Right now, with cool things in Intune and data labeling, we can do some of that stuff automatically, but making it the corporate culture that, hey, I got this thing, I'm going to label it first, and then I'll store it, then I'll go to the process, then I'll go through
having a policy and process that everybody knows, and that, as Tim just said, becomes the culture. It can't just be one person's job to do this. It can't just be, I am the data cop. It has to be everybody, and you have to have it published exactly.
So I'm gonna go right back to 3.1.
I'm your
Jennifer.
plant.
Right back to 3.1. Review and update on a cadence, at least annually or when significant changes. But I take that a step further, right? What good is a password policy if you don't train the end users? What good is a data classification policy if they've never seen it or don't know about it, right? That whole process of aligning it to the business practice, having somebody other than you being the authorizing official. Yep, this is our stuff. We agree. We've all come together. I agree. As the CEO, this is our stuff. Pushing it all the way down to the appropriate end users. In this case, data probably affects everybody in the company, even the salesperson, out on the street that never actually touches stuff. Well, yeah, you touch data. You're part of the flow. All the way down through that process, right? 3.1 talks about having that review and update annually. I take it a step further and having that attestation and that adoption on the other end. All right. I feel like I've talked enough about this. Before we kind of want to get into stuff, I want to kind of give anybody else any sort of key points to bring up because I really want to jam. What do you think, Wes?
Yeah, I think we all do.
All right.
So I'm not allowed to send this outside the organization because of my data classification policies that I have wrapped around it. But if you want, I'll share on the screen real quick. Our data mapping template.
Actually, before you do, this is being recorded and will be shared, right?
Yeah, you want me to hit pause real quick?
If you could hit pause,
Okay.
I would appreciate that.
Sorry,
Thank you.
folks watching the recording, but it kind of is what it is.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks,
so we're
Wes.
back.
I was going to mention a couple things on that business front. If you do have the VCIO process, or if you don't, but you go in as the owner or whatever to do some of the initial business work, if you start off by getting them used to doing it by, hey, let's do a quick map of how your business makes money, they get used to that process. And then you can say, hey, we can do the same process for any of your processes and help map them out for you. Is that something you're interested in? Now you're promoting a service, but you've given them a taste of it by starting out with it. The flip side is you can go back to your old customers or your existing customers and say, hey, this is a process we're implementing. Let me talk you through how we're doing this with some of our other clients and do the same how you make money business process with them so they see it. Just some thoughts.
Well said.
Stephen, you make a really great point, right? So new clients setting the precedence in the beginning with, this is how we operate, right? This is how we're working together, right? We're going to walk through these processes and you're going to gain stuff. Existing clients, hey, we're rolling out something new. We're looking at processing stuff, right? And we want to talk about your revenue life cycle. Let's map that out. Tell me, how do you make money and how can we help you make that wheel rounder and faster? Let's do a mind map or data flow exercise. You got that on the recording, right?
Yeah, we got it. That's solid. Great advice, Stephen, and love that, Tim. So open up the Jamboard. It's in chat. If you guys don't have chat open on Zoom, go click on that. And we've got this Jamboard. We can all start getting going.
Quick show of hands. Y'all used Jamboard before. Do I need to do a quick demo?
Quick demo.
All right. So we got little sticky notes. I'm going to hit cancel.
And I'm view only, Tim. I don't know if the rest of us are that way as well.
Share. Anyone with the link is an editor. Copy link. Done. Come back over here, paste one more time. I thought I did that appropriately. Now can try it.
Yep, that's more better.
Much more better, as my brother would say. Much more better. Perfect. All right, so we have a little pen that you can draw. I'm just going to go to a blank page here, right? So the pen, you can draw, pick your color, blah, blah, blah. We have the eraser, yada, yada, yada. We have pointer, so I can highlight stuff, and you all can do this. I'll go back to the other page in a minute. Little notes, pick a color, type in some stuff, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. Add pictures, we're probably not going to go there. Add shapes, those will kind of get in there. Doesn't have all the shapes that I want, but we'll get into that in a minute. Add text, and then, a little laser pointer. Woo, yay. All right, so any questions quickly on how to annotate stuff and how this works?
Good to go.
All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about, let me see if I can bring this up on the share. Oh, shit, I don't have it. Do I? All right. Yes. Tell me if you all can see my little image here on the symbols.
Mhm.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
So when we're doing DFD, there are some kind of standardized symbols that we should be using, right? The Jamboard won't let us draw circles and squares, but we'll kind of make do the best we can, right? So the entity symbol, obviously it represents, it depicts the source of stuff, where the circle talks about the process of stuff, data store and data flow. So we're going to kind of try to refer to these. I probably should have done a lucid chart instead, but Jamboard is free and here we are. So if y'all want to grab a screenshot of that or whatever, just so you have it in your brain of what we're doing as far as the symbols, and I can always pull it back up after. And Jennifer, is Jennifer still here? Great, and so isn't Bob. So the first part of a DFD that I like to work with is I start with who gives us data, right? So I'm just gonna, everybody pick a little note. I'll pick green because that goes kind of with my compliance risk. Oh, there you go, Wes. Perfect, thank you. And I'm gonna pick green. You can all pick whatever color you want. And I'm gonna say the scenario in which we talked about, did I not? Oh, I didn't talk about that, did I? Let's pull this back up over here. You see my PowerPoint? All right, so the scenario is you are an MSP, you just signed a contract for a small 8-person dentist office. You discovered that they have stress around HIPAA, that the client knows that they're going to have challenges. They're looking at all of this stuff and they want to pay you money to move into a data governance program because they have no idea. Dad sold the dentist office to Johnny. Johnny is gung-ho about protecting his dentist office. That is the scenario that we're working on. We all get that?
Got it.
Perfect. So, in thinking about that dentist office and thinking about ways in which they get data, and I'm just going to do one, and I'm going to say email. So I want you all to kind of do the similar thing, ways in which they receive data, not what kind of data, just how do they get the data? I'll give you all a few minutes. Oh, scan paper forms, that's good. Ooh, is your fax HIPAA compliant?
Access. Yes.
It
So
happens.
true.
Remember, dentist office. From insurance, that's a good one. Give people about 2 or 3 more minutes here.
Guys, I'm actually gonna have to drop off in about 3 minutes for another call, sorry.
No problem, Jennifer. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for joining and thank you for the valuable insight along the way. Oh, in person. Love it, love it. And give about 30 more seconds or so because this is kind of enough to start with. All right. Really great stuff here. So they're getting stuff in paper format, they're getting stuff in electronic format, they're getting stuff in physical voice format. I didn't see anybody put in their text message, but that's all right. So they're getting data all over the place, right? EHR systems, great. Maybe they're secure. Hopefully they are, depending on which one they're using nowadays. But they're getting stuff from all over the place, right? I'm gonna see if I can take control here, and I'm gonna move these into, that's electronic, that's paper, that's probably electronic, that's electronic. These two things are kind of fall into their own kind of categories, right? Even though we're getting it all the same way. Now let's see if I can do this. I want a square. There we go. And I'm gonna lump this all together. And the send order, send back. There we go. Great. How do we get data? These are all the bucket, and this is a very sort of simplistic version. When I'm actually doing this, I'm doing this in Visio, and I have a much better way of putting that together. So this is all, where do they get the data? Usually I can also start with who is giving them data, right? So let's start a whole nother series of who is giving them data, right? I'm gonna go, I don't know, patient, did I spell that right? I think so. Patient's giving them data. So another little series of who's giving them data.
By the way, I did drop a link to a free diagramming tool in the chat as well. It's one I've used in the past.
Diagrams.net is great. I tend to use that from, and you're stealing all my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
Good stuff though. Good stuff. Sharing is caring. Anyone else? Patient, doctors. Ooh, insurance. Good, good.
I guess I'm showing the limits of my healthcare knowledge here. I'm like, what else is gotta be others?
Wes, we go to 3:30 or we go to 3?
We're going to 3:30 because I knew it would go. If anyone needs to drop, totally get it, to jump back into the last 30 minutes of the recording when we'll have it up tomorrow. But yeah, we're going to 3:30 because I knew we would need an hour and a half for this.
Yep, good, good. Patient, doctor, insurance, equipment. I'll add one then. That. Right? School nurse. Okay, so let me pause here. Let me do this. Actually, I'm going to actually do it this way. I'm going to move all these over here because for the moment. And I want to move these in the middle. I did it backwards. I should have went to my original and said, hey, this is generally how we do things. Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. You all got the gist of what I was doing. All right. The who gives us data. The how they give us data, right? And I'm going to go back to my Visio so I don't do that again. Now that we know who's giving us, the types of things that they're giving us, now we need to kind of get into, all right, who gets the data? Is it Sally's secretary? Is it, Mike the mailman? Who gives us, who gets the data in the building?
I'm going to go with the really hard one here, doctors.
Okay. All right, so I'll throw these out there while we're kind of listening. So secretary at the front desk, could be the mailman, mailwoman, right? PHR vendor, right? It could be the nurse practitioners, could be yeah, front desk is good. Thank you for that, clarifying and making sure I'm a little more politically correct. Accountant, that's probably a good one as well. The dental hygienist, that's right, because we're talking about a dentist's office. Thank you for bringing us back over there. All right, so we kind of have some of these buckets of who's getting the data, right? Oh, MSP. Ooh, nice, nice. Just patient over here. All right. Who put MSP? Raise your hand.
That's me.
Nice. That's awesome, though. All right, let's do this. Let's send this to the back. Send it back. All right, so Wes's little annotation diagram. All right, so now we've kind of talked a little bit about what are we getting, how is it getting to us, and who's getting it, right? And we can go back to our annotation map. We can make the right boxes. We can put some connectors and some flows together. Like the doctor referrals are most likely faxing stuff to the front desk, right? We're for the sake of what we're doing here today, I'm not going to do that. But the general idea is from here, we're going to do things like we're going to say the doctor is going to fax stuff, and they're going to fax stuff to the front desk, right? And granted, you can do this much better in Lucidcharts or Diagram.net or my favorite Visio, right? And so, you know, the patient, I'll pick a different color. The patient is probably going to talk in phone, right, to the person on the front desk, right? So you kind of get where we're going with this, right? Questions so far?
I just want to throw out one quick thing, and then I actually have to bounce as well. Good stuff, though. So way back in early 90s when I was in school, what we learned is an IPO chart, which is effectively what you're building, right? So it's the input, what's the process, and then what's the output. And sometimes it's easier to say, here's the output. What inputs do I need? That's more the developer side. But IPO is good, or you can add the source in front of that with the client as the outside of that. But that's a little thought, and then I got to bounce. Thanks, Wes. And
Stephen,
Tim.
great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks.
So you get where we're going with this. Identifying the types of data, who's giving us the data, how they're giving us the data, where is it winding up inside of the organization, right? Each one of these can be its own individually defined, as Stephen said, IPO, its own defined process, right? This particular, from doctor to fax to front desk, you could process that as a DFD all by itself. And then actually put in the tools and technologies and the things for that each workflow, right? This can get really deep if you wanted to. And I think Bob and Jennifer are probably alluding to that, right? We're taking the 10,000 foot view here. It can go all the way down into the patient does it this way on this day of the week when the moon is in whatever, right? I don't want you to get into analysis paralysis. Being able to just start at a very high level with your clients and say, this is what you're getting, this is how you're getting it, and this is who deals with it in your building. Where do we go from here, right? Questions about that part of the process?
Makes sense.
Okay. Now the next question is, that's great, we've mapped out some stuff, where do we go? Let me move over to the next slide. Actually, let's do this. Can I do this? Let's do this. this. New. Let's see if I can steal that and put it over here and paste it there. Oh, love it. All right, so this is where we wound up with who gets it in our building, right? How does it, like, the humans in our building, the things, the fax machines, the email, the things in our building. Now we've got all this data coming at us. Now what do we do? Anybody have a guess besides Bob or Wes? No? Let me just draw a little box right here. I'm gonna do order, send it back. And I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do STEWARD. Anybody know what a data steward is?
A steward of your data.
Thank you, Captain Obvious. Yes. Or we could use terms like, hold on, am I on the right tool? EATACUSTIODIAN. Did I spell that right? Custodian?
Close enough.
Close enough. There. Thank you, Grimley. Data steward, data custodian, they are the people that you can help identify in that business. Either, you know, I'm going to delete it and you can spell it right. Who are responsible for taking these data sources and doing something with them, right? Generally speaking, and I'll put my sort of educator hat on here for a minute. In that educational company, typically we would define a project director, and that project director would be the data custodian. It would be their obligation to determine categorization, to determine dissemination. So in this context of a dental office, could be the office director, right? It could be the nurse practitioner. It could be the, you know, assistant, like, you know, you got the lead dentist and the assistant dentist. It could be any one of those humans that says, we're getting all this data, noise. I am the one ultimately responsible for making sure, as the data steward and data custodian, that stuff goes where it's supposed to, and the right people have the access to it. Now, in a small dentist office of 8 people that, you know, Bobby just took over from his dad, who's been running for 40 years on, you know, fax and paper, they have a large job ahead of them. But us as an MSP can help them with that process and ultimately protecting the data and getting them efficient, right? So the data custodian and the data steward have the obligation to make sure stuff is protected. In this case, you might think of the CISO, like they're the ones ultimately responsible. This is where we get into the policies and procedures. We get into the BPNM, so business process and notation. We get into how do we help those businesses, this particular dentist office, protect and move forward, right? And I do a little thing like, I'm just going to pull this one up over here because it's easier in Visio. So now that we've defined who has the data, I start to develop the use case, the workflow, the labeling, the policy, the procedure, the things. And I start to work with that data custodian to develop policy and SOP, right? So I guess over here, I could do this, and I could do, can I change the color? I can change the color. We can do define P OLC and SOP, not and SOP. This is where I work with them to start to define policy and procedure. They've identified the human responsible or humans. Some of the organizations that people, sorry, trying to be politically correct. They've identified the people that are ultimately responsible, and I work with them to figure out how this all flows, where we can gain efficiencies. But what does that look like in practicality? From an MSP perspective, as Wes said, you're getting the data, right? The first question I would ask is the data steward, does your MSP even need access to that data? Well, I don't know. Ask the MSP. Wes, do you need access to that data? As an MSP, why would you need access to that data?
Probably don't. I mean, other than perhaps to support something that goes awry. You know, I got a help desk ticket. It's trying to figure out why I can't access the system. I'll get some error message on the LOB app.
Yeah, that's always the tricky part about when you're doing managed services and it's server based and they've got data on the server. You know, you have to be very careful about how you quantify and qualify what it is that you have access to, for the very reason you're talking about, right? If you, as an MSP, you want to not be responsible for compliance reasons for HIPAA and other kinds of data, you just got to structure the agreement to where you just don't have access to those pieces. They're encrypted, and unless you have an application level login, then you're not going to be able to see it, right? But that is a very tricky area right there to make sure. You have to be very careful about how you define those things, because you could literally be taking on a lot more work than you think if you don't do that well.
So I'll play advocate for a minute, and you kind of alluded to some of this stuff, right? I'm the MSP. I'm supporting the dentist office. Sally Secretary calls up and says, hey, I can't get into the thing. My mouse isn't working. Ticket comes in. Your tech's going to look at that ticket and be like, great, I'll just remote in and help her fix her mouse. What's wrong with that picture?
You're going to get a look at that data if you're not careful.
Yeah.
She's going to have that application open, and you're going to get stuck that way. So part of your SOPs when you're doing that, you have to say, look, we'll work on your mouse, but you're going to have to close that application for now, and we'll make sure that the mouse is okay. And if you're still having problems with that application, you're going to have to call your application support people, but you have to include that in your diagnostic steps. That's one of those little tricky spots.
Awesome. So, now as an MSP, I got to train my staff on how to deal with HIPAA or compliance or regulated clients in doing their work. Oh, wait, now I, as an MSP, need my own SOP and policy.
You do. Yes.
Let's kind of do this a little differently then. So, accountant, let's pick on the accountant here for a minute. Does the accountant need EPHI? I guess I should probably ask the question way before that. And then, can somebody define what is EPHI for us as a group, so we have a level set?
Electronic patient health information, and Derek says yes. So Derek, can you come off mute and give us a yes reasoning?
Your accountant's going to be responsible for billing and reconciling. So they're going to have access. Yes, the answer is yes. Because they're going to communicate with your insurance companies and all those people that pay you.
Okay.
At a minimum, they're going to be making sure you got paid the right amount by the insurance company doing the coverage. So yes.
Sort of agree. I only say I sort of agree, but because now we've identified all these key components of their DFD that have access to stuff that they might not need access to, right? When I think of the accountant, what does the accountant actually need in order for us to reconcile, for them to reconcile billing. Now, having worked in the biotech firm and having looked at that kind of stuff and actually worked with the accountants and the CFOs, they probably don't need the full picture of EPHI to do billing, right? 99% of the time, they're using a third-party company that ties into the EPHR vendor, that ties into their data collection systems, that tie into that stuff. And they don't actually ever have to touch or see or have access to EPHI, right? Because the systems that are in place, or if they're not, can be in place, you as the MSP consulting to them saying, listen, we can put in, I don't know, Epic. Epic is a huge EPHR system, probably one you wouldn't use for an 8-person dentist office. But we could put in Epic, and Epic will do all of this work and reconcile your billing for you, and your accountant never has to look at it, touch it, or see it. Great. We've just removed one human in that risk chain, or a group of humans in that risk chain.
But also in so doing, introducing new areas for risk assessment, right? Like, who is this vendor? What are their processes? What are their SOPs?
Right.
You know, what kinds of policies they have in place? What contractual risk do I entertain by going with them? So yeah, I see your point.
Yeah, Med1. So this is great because I in the height of the beginning of the pandemic started to work with a biotech company that was doing I don't know, 10,000 COVID tests a day in New York City, like crazy amount on a wicked old, non-existent, really bad system, and moved them into a platform like an Epic, did the vendor due diligence, did all of that stuff, but realized there's EPHI all over the place. So stop, pump the brakes, do some VDD, vendor due diligence, put the right tools in. What not only did it protect the data, but it made them way more operationally efficient. They went from 10,000 to, I think their first year, they did almost 3 million COVID tests in that short amount of time because they gained those efficiencies. And by the way, got billed for them all, and the accountant never saw any of that EPHI data. So that's why, you know, we always try to say ourselves as like, yeah, we just don't fix ones and zeros. We are your business partner. And these are some of the ways we help you do that. Great. Cognizant, 10 minutes left here, 20 minutes left here, 15. Moving from the defining the policies and procedures, I shared a little bit earlier about some of the sample data for classifications and data governance policies. I'm not going to get too deep into that. I have the next part is, this is specifically one for CMMC, by the way, because you can see Feds, Prime, others. FTP, email, SFTP, SharePoint, CD-ROMs. We didn't even talk about that in how we're getting the data. But where does the data live? I thought I had a second one specifically for, maybe this is the one. Yeah, identify and classify. That's kind of the step that we're on right now, right? And I'll make these videos available. I'll drop the link in Slack. Now that we've talked to the stewards, we've organized and identified the right humans that should be able to or not able to. We've scoped appropriately. We've defined those policies and procedures. In those policies and procedures, we've defined how labeling happens, right? Standardized kind of thing. FCI, that's typically for federal contract information, but in this particular case, we mentioned EPHI, so electronic public health record. Even creating your own standardized naming or nomenclature for stuff that they understand and you understand can be helpful, right? We talked about PII, personal identifying information. We talked about SPII, sensitive personal identifying information, social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name, Wes's credit card number, right? Categorize, there's a whole boatload of standardized categorizations. We've actually made up a couple of our own as well, when dealing with student data and blah, 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 blah. So classifying that stuff and then building out your process. Hey, we got a fax from Johnny's doctor's office. Looks like it's got EPHI on it. We're going to stamp that with EPHI. We're going to scan it into our system. When that document is in here, we're going to label that appropriately. And then we're going to put that in where we've identified saving that information. All right, I'm seeing some blank stares. Do I need to back up and slow down again? No? Perfect. All right. So where did we start? I'm going to recap. We identified who's giving us data. We've identified how they're giving us data. We've identified who in the organization gets the data. And then we started to figure out, now what? By having a champion in the building, a data steward, a data custodian, determining, are these the right humans that should have access? And where possible, scoping them out. And by scoping them out, we define the policies and procedures that say, okay, MSP, your policy should be you never connect to our machine without first informing the end user to close down anything that might have EPHI on it. Your data is always encrypted in transit. Your connections are always encrypted, Mr. or Mrs. MSP. Your backups get encrypted, stay immutable, and can only be restored in our environment, right? All of these little nuances, you as the MSP work out with the data steward, data custodian. This is how you're going to conduct business. If you need access to that data, the accountant, we're going to scope you out, and here's the tools and technologies that we're going to help you put in place by doing better due diligence, and we're going to scope you out. And all of that stuff is then defined in your policy and in your procedures. And that gives us about 7 minutes left for questions.
So this is sort of like the beginning structures. And then what you'd want to do from here, Tim, would be actually building those data flows. Like what you mentioned before, we're now stretching these things out, documenting from here to there. We start going through that process. Okay. Yeah.
Correct. And that's kind of what I did. So this is one of the samples that I did not too long ago. By the way, I just dropped a zip file link in that actually come over or no? Oh, I don't think it did. No, it came in as a picture. Darn it. Why did it not come in as a link? Notepad. That was really weird. It came in as a picture and not as a link. There you go. In chat, you have the link to these diagrams, right? So yes, this is literally where I go now that I've kind of got the high level. Great. This is Health and Human Services, right? Department of Health and Human Services. They're going to send us student data and it's going to go to the data steward, right? This is where those, do I still have that up here? No, because I took that other screenshot. This is where the circles and the squares and the arrows come into play. And I'm going to take each one of these things, one of these flows that I kind of haphazardly arrowed out with, little drawings. And I'm going to break that out into its own. And I'm going to figure out all the details of that workflow. And I'm going to move to the next one, figure out all the details of that workflow. And there may be cross between it, right? A patient can fax, a doctor can fax, a school nurse can fax or email or whatever, right? So there's going to be some of these sub processes that have overlapped in interconnectivities. And drill a little deeper each time.
Yep, makes sense. All right, we got 5 minutes left. Anyone have any questions, thoughts?
I had a question. So for someone just trying to sell security services, what would be the best route to go with this data flow? I know you guys talked about getting the bottom line of what their revenue is and going that way. But what are some other directions you would possibly go following that kind of framework?
Say that again. I'm wrapping my head around it. Let me
Yeah, no. So I know you're asking, you were talking about specifically like security services. So I know Wes talked about bringing up like revenue and talking about like the risk revenue. But what are some other areas that you would want to talk about implementing this data flow and kind of flow mapping out, hey, where can I go with this, with the data that they're kind of giving me?
So yes, from a cybersecurity or compliance perspective, yes, from a revenue life cycle, that really is a really good one, because once you get them talking about how they're making money and help, like they're talking about themselves, which they love to do, not only that, but they also like, this is what makes us tick, right? But you could even go down, like when I was building out the IT infrastructure for that organization, they had one human and built that out to 20 humans, right? Talking through how are we going to structure your business, right? You want to grow from your 8 or 10 really cool mad scientists that know how to do COVID tests to a fully fledged manufacturing biotech company. And how do you get there? I can talk to you about building out a technology team and how that works, from vCISO to CTO to director to developer to, I can map that out. So, from that business perspective, like, I know how to build IT teams. Let me help you do that.
I've got an example. I've got an example of this. I'll just share from my own embarrassments. So we had, this is over 10 years ago, but when I was a CIO at a bank, we got a couple of tickets coming in from our loan ops team. So this is like the team of people that are taking all the operational stuff from the lenders, doing all the operations for the loan to make sure all the compliance checks are done. We have to resource to a third-party bank. They did a ton of stuff that they did, right? It's a big team of people. And we got an email that came in from the loan ops director, and she said, hey, we're done with email. We're full. Like, we can't operate anymore because our email inboxes are full. I'm like, this is like 10 years ago. I gave him like 2 gig email limits. Like, I don't understand. What? Everyone else is like way under. And so I'm like, I don't understand this. We hadn't done data flows. We weren't at that level of maturity yet, right? So we went over there to find out, why the heck are your inboxes full? And she's like, well, we do everything over email. I'm like, yeah, but you have a loan ops system that does everything. I don't understand how does that correlate? And she's like, well, you just don't understand we do business. I'm like, clearly I don't. So can you just walk me through like I'm an idiot and just teach me step by step? And I kid you not, Jonathan, one of the things that they did was, when the loan ops system would output a PDF from everything that was like filled out from the lender, loan ops person number one would take that email. They would email it to the next loan ops person. So they would open the email, they would go into like edit mode in the email, and they'd start popping in their notes and correcting a couple things. All the regulatory stuff banks have to do. I don't really care. It was just stuff they have to do, right? And then what they would do is they'd save it as a PDF. they would open an email to the next person, they would copy in the edited PDF, but because they had to have a train of documentation, they then would take the old original PDF and they would drag the email in as a .eml file that came in with the previous PDF. Next loan ops person would pick that up. And they did the same thing. They would make their changes. So now they have that email plus the attachment of another email, the PDF plus attachment of another email. Those suckers were trading around daily, emails that were going into like 30, 40, 50 megs. And I was like, what? Like, not only is this a horrible, horrible idea from like privacy perspectives, but like, what? This is unbelievable. Just one forward to the wrong person, and you got mountains of data that's just gone to the wrong place. So I sat down. I'm like, I got two choices here. I can berate them on how stupid this is, or I could recognize this is kind of on my team for not really getting involved in their process.
Right.
So I sat down, I said, I got it. I said, so here's what we're going to do. Today, we're going to increase your inbox limits, but tomorrow we're going to begin a new process. What if I had a process for you that's going to save you guys at least hours every day? And I really jumped into that perspective. She's like, well, I'd be interested in that, right? Because she didn't really want me to step on her toes on what she did, right? I'm the IT guy. She's the loan ops person. So we sat down and we actually mapped out their current flows. And then I showed her, hey, if we do it this way instead, we have file structures, we got the storage thing we can do here. And we started to remap things out. She's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. She's like, I just didn't know that was a thing. I'm like, totally, it's a thing. And we can automate all of this away. And by the way, this train of documentation, next time your auditors come in, you ain't got to touch anything. You don't have to pull out emails. You just go to the auditor and say, here's your access to this system for the days you've accessed, go away. And she's like, oh, I love that. So my point is, like, data flows can really come into a process reorganization. And I think MSPs in the future, it's not just billable service over like per seat pricing, but I think the future of MSPs is coming into like business transformation. How can we come into your business and redo everything you're doing and build in new automations and really put you in a scale to be scalable in the future? In the coming recession, I think that's one of the most valuable things MSPs can do. So that's just one thing, Jonathan, that comes to the front of my mind is like really using data flow diagrams to rethink how we do business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not limited to just cybersecurity. In fact, I would say on the grand scheme of the entire business, while it's very important in the cybersecurity part, all the other business like BPNM, you probably heard me say that earlier, business process and notation, right? How do we, and it's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into that. That's probably a 3-day workshop, but a data flow diagram can really start with, what am I doing? Where is it? How do I make the current wheel rounder and faster? That's the whole premise. How do I make it rounder and faster and provide some seatbelts on it along the way?
Fantastic question. Anyone else have a question? Stuart, I know you're still on. If you're still around, I know you guys are pretty new to data flow diagrams. Any feedback, thoughts, lessons learned, questions?
There's a lot to learn. I can say that. This is all very, very new to me.
It's a deep well. If you can just get people to adopt a damn naming convention for their files, you'll cut out about 20% of their damn workload just because they can find stuff. So yeah. Wes, you went an order of magnitude better by saying, hey, here's a file structure for you to use. But how do you name those damn things matters too, right? If you want to try and find one file, in a file structure that's been operating for years, that was a huge thing for us here, just introducing an actual naming convention for files that have to be reused either as SOPs or whatever, so that you can do a simple search and get them. You know what I mean? So it really is. It's as deep and as wide as you really want to go, to be honest with you. So, and the only way to ever get people to, there are visual learners, and then there's, auditory learners. I mean, there's different types of learners, but the one tool that almost universally works is a diagram and how that actually flows. It has the highest probability of being assimilated by whoever you're trying to communicate it with, whether they're a visual learner or not. But if you just try to explain it with a flat 2-dimensional procedure to somebody, the odds are they're not going to really assimilate that very well. But if you include a diagram kind of shows how it works, you're going to get up in the 80-85% range right off the bat. So that's just kind of the statistics of the situation.
So let's close on this, Tim. Why don't you give us, so I'm new to this. I've gone through this. now we actually did it together, which was really valuable, but I'm still brand new on the journey. Give me 1 or 2 starting point tips that you would recommend to an MSP really wanting to get going down the DFD journey.
So there's lots of great resources on the internet. Google is your friend here, of course. Wes, myself, whatever. I think that I say this all the time in everything, and that is start someplace. Doesn't matter where you start someplace. The key is to start. Don't let analysis paralysis stop you, right? Even if you're doing this internally, right? Start with your ticket workflow. You do those thousands of times a day, or however many times a day. Start with your own ticket workflow. Pull your entire team aside, maybe a Friday afternoon, buy them lunch, sit down around the table on a whiteboard or pens and papers, and map out how do you deal with your ticket workflow, because that's data and it's diagramming that out. And how are you dealing with your ticket workflow today? Do it internally. You'll build that muscle memory by doing these things over and over, right? Start internally. Ticket workflow, invoice workflow, right? CRM workflow. You can do this stuff in your business, and you can pick an hour or so a week, 20 minutes a week, and do a little workshop internally. That would be where I would start. You don't have to go after the $1 million client to get zillions of dollars of MRR until you gain that muscle memory. Not only are you doing it internally and gaining muscle memory, but guess what? You're going to have a documented, repeatable process in your own business. So you're going to gain those efficiencies.
Well said. So there you go. 2 big things I heard from you, Tim. One is eat your own tacos. So start yourself. One of the best advantages MSPs have is they can do things for themselves before they do them for others. That is a huge advantage, and we should seize on it. And 2, in light of that, I love that you said just pick one process. So instead of trying to think through how does the MSP operate as a whole, and you're analysis paralysis, blank slate of where do we start, pick a system. Yep, love it. I'm with you. I would start on ticket workflow. What an immensely valuable thing to start with that I promise you will lead back into tons of to-dos. You can get your teams excited to be like, when are we doing that again? I want to follow up on X, Y, and Z. We made these changes over here, and oh my goodness, so much better for us. And then all of a sudden you're like, what? Light bulb clicks. Now I can do that for my clients and make them crazy happy. And like you said, Tim, at the very beginning of this, maybe I do one little bit for free for them. And then they see how awesome this is. And we say, how would you guys like to do a complete re-architecture of your business transformation? And let's pick one thing at a time. Yes, but now there's some billable hours here that we need to do because we're going to really help you transform this. Let's just pick one thing at a time. By the way, if you guys don't see value on it, no problem. We just done only one system. But I promise you, you're going to see a lot of things that come out of this. Security perspective, compliance perspective, business process perspective, efficiency perspective. And now you've just boosted MRR like crazy, or at least project revenue, I should say. Absolutely love that, Tim. Great feedback.
You want to build some fun rapport, just write down on a note what you're going to find, put it in an envelope and sit it in the middle of the table, then go through the process and then pull that out and say, let's see if I got this right, and read it. Because you're going to get it right 99% of the time, because the same problems are the same no matter where you're at. But if you want to build some rapport, I've done that. But I call that the Karnak. I always say, hey, I'm going to play Karnak today, which is the old Johnny Carson deal. And I'd put that stuff I'd write it down, put it in an envelope and say, okay, let's go. And then we would run through it and I say, well, let's go see if I was anywhere near the truth. Let's see what Karnak thought.
That's awesome. All right, everyone, we're going to cut it here. Thank you guys so much for joining. Hope this was helpful to you. We will get this recording into Empath, so you'll have it there forever. Tim, one last thing for us as you go. What's your website? I think I see it right here, but compliancerisk.io. And what can MSPs learn from going there?
People, process, policy. People, much like Wes, a little different. We have a peer group specifically on compliance. Process, compliance as a service. We partner with you and your clients to help get them compliance ready. Policy, just launched our policy documentation app for managing and governing policy workflow. People, process, policy.
Awesome. Tim, thank you so very much for leading us through this. It's been awesome, immensely valuable. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Wes.
All right, everyone, take care.
Thank you.